Listen, I need you to understand something right from the start. When the humans first arrived at the Galactic Council Station, nobody took them seriously. Nobody. And I mean that in the most literal, mathematically provable sense of the term. My name is Vornik, and I work in the Environmental Adaptation Department on Station Gamma 9. That is a fancy way of saying I make sure visiting species do not accidentally kill themselves or others by breathing the wrong gas mixture or stepping into a gravity field that turns their organs into soup. It is not glamorous work, but somebody has to keep these idiots alive long enough to sign trade agreements. The day the human delegation arrived, I was having what I thought would be a perfectly normal morning. I was sipping my third cup of stimulant fluid, reviewing gravity tolerance charts, when my supervisor, a blob of sentient gel named Plork, oozed into my workspace. Vornik. Plork gurgled, his translation node crackling with what I had learned to recognize as barely contained amusement. We have a new species checking in today, humans, from a planet called Earth. I pulled up their file on my datapad, expecting the usual specifications. Temperature preferences, atmospheric requirements, dietary restrictions, the standard boring stuff that keeps me employed. Then I saw their gravity rating, 9.8 meters per second squared. I read aloud, certain there had been a clerical error. That cannot be right. That is almost Death World classification. Plork jiggled in what passed for a shrug among his people. The data has been verified 3 times. Apparently they evolved on a planet with genuinely absurd gravitational pull. Command wants them kept in the high G observation section. I laughed. Actually laughed. The high G section? We built that for the Chromoth, and even they complained it was excessive. You are telling me these soft-looking bipeds live in that kind of crushing force naturally, according to their biological scans? Yes. Plork wobbled closer to my screen. Look at their bone density, their muscle fiber composition. Vornik. These creatures are built like siege equipment disguised as diplomats. I examined the scans more carefully. He was not wrong. Human skeletal structure was bizarre, almost comically over-engineered. Their bones were not just dense, they were reinforced with multiple layers and filled with their own biological material production facilities. Their muscles attached in configurations that suggested leverage and explosive force rather than efficiency. This is ridiculous, I muttered. What kind of evolutionary nightmare produces something this sturdy for a supposedly intelligent species? They should be living underground, mining minerals with their bare hands, not building spacecraft. Well, Plork said, his tone taking on that warning quality that meant my day was about to get complicated. They built spacecraft anyway. Very good ones, apparently. And now they want to join the council. Of course they did. 2 hours later I stood in docking bay 12, watching the human shuttle settle onto the landing platform with surprising grace for something that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and determination. The airlock hissed open, and out stepped 5 humans in matching dark blue uniforms. The one in front, a female with short brown hair and sharp green eyes, smiled at the reception committee. Her identification badge read, Captain Jessica Reeves, and she moved with the kind of controlled precision that made my danger sensors twitch. Greetings, she said, her voice warm and friendly through the translation device clipped to her collar. On behalf of Earth and the Human Systems Alliance, thank you for welcoming us to Gamma 9. The council representative, a tall, thin Velusian named Quix, bowed slightly. The gesture looked awkward in the station's standard 1.2G environment, which I had carefully calibrated to be comfortable for most species while not being so light that everyone floated away during important meetings. We are honored to host your delegation, Captain Reeves, Quix said, his voice carrying that formal, slightly condescending tone that senior council members used with new applicants. I trust your journey was pleasant? Smooth as glass, Reeves replied, and I noticed her eyes scanning the docking bay with the kind of tactical assessment that suggested military training. Though I will admit your gravity here feels a bit light, like walking on a trampoline. Several of the council members chuckled at what they assumed was a joke. I did not laugh. I was too busy watching the way the other humans moved. They were not adjusting to the gravity. They were compensating for it, automatically, the way you might adjust your stride when walking downhill. 1.2G felt light to them. I suddenly had a very bad feeling about this. The tour began normally enough. Kix led the human delegation through the main concourse, pointing out various features of the station, with the kind of practiced enthusiasm that diplomats perfect over decades. The humans nodded politely, asked intelligent questions, and generally behaved like every other new species going through orientation. Then we reached the central plaza, and things got interesting. The plaza is the social heart of Gamma 9, a vast open space where species from across the galaxy mingle, trade and occasionally attempt to poison each other with what they insist are friendly gestures. It features restaurants, shops, entertainment venues, and most importantly for this story, a large fountain in the center that shoots water up in a graceful arc before it falls back down. In 1.2G, that water arc is a beautiful, lazy parabola that artists have painted approximately 8,000 times. Captain Reeves stopped at the fountain's edge, watching the water with a slightly puzzled expression. "Interesting," she murmured, pulling a small cylinder from her pocket. It was a writing instrument, I later learned. Humans call them pens. "May I conduct a small experiment?" Quix gestured magnanimously. "Of course. The station facilities are at your disposal." What happened next occurred in perhaps 2 seconds, but I swear I watched it unfold in slow motion. Reeves held the pen out over the fountain at shoulder height and released it. The pen dropped. Not fell, dropped. Like a rock, like a meteor, like the hammer of an angry god deciding that this particular writing implement had offended the universe and needed to be punished immediately. It hit the plaza floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the entire space. The floor, which was constructed of composite materials designed to withstand impacts from cargo equipment, heavy foot traffic and the occasional drunken backsin, developed a visible fracture radiating out from the point of impact. The pen, for what it is worth, exploded into several pieces. Every conversation in the plaza stopped. Every being within visual range turned to stare at the cracked floor, then at Captain Reeves, then back at the floor as if expecting it to heal itself through sheer embarrassment. "Huh," Reeves said, crouching down to examine the damage with genuine curiosity. "Your construction materials are lighter than I expected. On Earth, that would not have done more than scratch the surface." Quix made a sound like air escaping from a deflating balloon. "That floor is rated for impacts up to 3,000 newtons. Reeves looked up at him, and I saw the exact moment she realized what had just happened. Her expression shifted from curiosity to understanding, to a very careful neutrality that suggested she was trying very hard not to laugh. "Ah," she said, standing up slowly. "I think I see the issue. Your gravity here is about 1/8 what I am used to. I did not account for the difference in force multiplication." "Force multiplication," I heard myself say, my voice coming out higher than intended. "You are saying that in Earth gravity, dropping that pen would have hit 8 times harder?" "Well, technically yes, but we do not really think about it that way. Things fall. That is what they do." She paused, looking around at the assembled aliens who were still staring at her like she had just performed dark magic. "Do things not fall quickly where you come from?" One of the Velusian merchants, a portly individual named Drex who sold gravity adjustment equipment, actually laughed. "Not fall quickly. My dear, most civilized species evolved on worlds where objects descend at 3 to 5 meters per second squared. Your homeworld's gravitational constant is nearly double the galactic average. You are from what we classify as a high-gravity death trap." Reeves tilted her head slightly, and I recognized the expression. I had seen it before on the faces of engineers right before they explained why your supposedly impossible problem had a very simple solution that made you feel like an idiot. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said slowly. "You are telling me that most intelligent species in the galaxy evolved on planets with significantly less gravity than Earth. Which means that what feels normal to me is to you oppressive and dangerous." "Precisely," Kix said, recovering some of his diplomatic composure. "It is quite remarkable that your species managed to develop spaceflight technology under such crushing conditions. Most high-G worlds produce species that are too exhausted by their own body weight to look up at the stars, much less reach them. The other humans in the delegation had gathered around their captain. One of them, a tall man with dark skin and sergeant stripes on his uniform, was grinning broadly. "Captain," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "I believe we may have stumbled onto a significant cultural difference." "I believe you are correct, Sergeant Miller," Reeves replied, and I heard the laughter she was suppressing. "Gentlemen, ladies, we may need to revise our assumptions about standard galactic physics, and that is when things got truly weird. The thing about humans, I learned over the next few hours, is that they treat physics like a suggestion rather than a law. After the pen incident, which maintenance crews were still arguing about how to properly repair, Kix decided to move the tour along quickly. I think he was hoping to get through the rest of orientation without any more structural damage to the station. Poor, naive Kix. We proceeded to the diplomatic conference hall, a magnificent space with soaring ceilings and observation windows that offered a spectacular view of the nebula beyond. The room was equipped with variable gravity zones, allowing different species to sit in their preferred environmental conditions during negotiations. Captain Reeves and her team were assigned to Zone 7, which I had calibrated to a comfortable 1.5 G. Higher than station standard, but still well below what their files indicated they needed. I watched nervously as they entered the zone, expecting them to show some sign of relief at the increased weight. Instead, Reeves just nodded approvingly. "Better," she said. "Closer to home. Though still feels a bit bouncy." 1.5 G felt bouncy to her. I made a note to submit a formal complaint to whoever designed the environmental rating system, because clearly it was not accounting for species who considered crushing gravitational force to be a mild inconvenience. The conference began with the usual formalities. Various council members introduced themselves, outlined the requirements for membership, discussed trade opportunities, and generally performed the elaborate dance of interstellar politics that keeps the galaxy from descending into complete chaos. The humans listened politely, asked intelligent questions, and took notes on their electronic devices. Then Councillor Thex, a pompous Regillian with an inflated sense of his own importance, decided to show off. "Of course," Thex said, his triple-jointed arms gesturing expansively, "membership in the Council requires certain demonstrations of capability. We must ensure that prospective members can contribute meaningfully to galactic society." Reeves leaned forward slightly. "What kind of demonstrations?" Thex's mouthparts curved into what his species considered a smile but what most others recognized as a smirk. "Physical trials, primarily, tests of strength, endurance, adaptability, standard procedures to ensure biological compatibility with Council operations." I saw Sergeant Miller lean over and whisper something to Reeves. She nodded slightly, her expression remaining professionally neutral. "We would be happy to participate in any standard trials," she said smoothly. "When would you like to schedule them?" "Oh, no need to schedule," Thex replied, clearly enjoying himself. "We can conduct basic assessments right here. For instance, strength evaluation." He gestured to a corner of the room where a standard grip force meter sat on a pedestal. It was a simple device used across the galaxy to measure hand strength. The current council record was held by a Chromath delegate, who had registered 850 newtons. "Please," Thex said, his tone dripping with false politeness, "demonstrate your species' capability." I wanted to object. I wanted to point out that this was irregular, that physical trials were supposed to be conducted in controlled environments with proper safety protocols. But Quickus was nodding along, and several other council members were watching with obvious interest. Reeves stood up, and I noticed that the movement was perfectly controlled despite the change in gravity zones. She walked over to the grip meter with the kind of casual confidence that should have warned everyone what was coming. She picked up the device, examined it for a moment, then wrapped her fingers around the grip sensor and squeezed. The number on the display climbed rapidly. 500 newtons, 600, 700, 800. Thex stopped smiling. 900, 1000, 1100. The device started making a high-pitched whining sound that I recognized as a warning indicator, suggesting it was approaching maximum tolerance. 1200, 1300. The whining became a shriek. 1400 newtons. Something inside the grip meter broke with a sound like a gunshot. Smoke began pouring from the internal mechanisms. Reeves quickly released the device and set it down on the pedestal, where it continued smoking and making distressed electronic noises. "I apologize," she said, looking genuinely concerned. "Is that device expensive? I can have our engineering team look at it if you would like." The conference hall was absolutely silent except for the dying squeals of the grip meter. Reeves had gone through several color changes that I was fairly certain were not healthy for his species. Creech made a strangled sound, and I started laughing. I could not help it. The absurdity of the situation, the look on Thex's face, the casual way Reeves had just demolished a piece of equipment that had survived decades of testing by species from across the galaxy. It was too much. 1400 newtons, I gasped, between laughs. She registered 1400 newtons before the device catastrophically failed. That is nearly double the previous record. And she was not even straining. Reeves looked at me with an expression of polite confusion. "Is that good? I honestly have no reference for your measurement standards." "Good?" I wheezed, trying to get my breathing under control. "Captain, the average council species can generate perhaps 300 newtons of grip force. The strongest species we know of, the Cromoth, who evolved on a high-gravity world and are built like mobile fortresses, managed 850. You just casually doubled that and broke our testing equipment." One of the other humans, a woman with red hair and an equipment specialist badge that read Lieutenant Park, raised her hand tentatively. "If it helps," she offered, "Captain Reeves is not even particularly strong by human standards. She is about average for someone with military fitness training. Our actual strength athletes can generate significantly more force." The silence that followed that statement was somehow even more profound than the previous silence. "Average," Kix repeated faintly. "You are saying this is average for your species? For humans in good physical condition, yes," Park confirmed cheerfully. "The captain stays fit, obviously, but she is not a powerlifter or anything. Those folks are kind of scary, honestly." Thex had recovered enough of his composure to attempt reasserting control of the situation. "Strength is only one measure of capability," he said, his voice only shaking slightly. "There are many other factors to consider. Reaction time, for instance." "Oh no," I thought. "Please do not challenge them to reaction time tests." Cirx pulled out a standard neural response evaluator, a handheld device that flashed lights in random patterns and measured how quickly the subject could press the corresponding buttons. "The council average response time is approximately 0.2 seconds, Thex explained. "Exceptional individuals can achieve 0.15 seconds. Would you care to try?" Reeves took the device, examined it briefly, and nodded. "Sure." The test began. Lights flashed. Reeves pressed buttons. The device displayed her average response time after 20 trials. 0.08 seconds. Thex stared at the readout like it had personally insulted his ancestors. "That is not possible," he said flatly. "The device must be malfunctioning." "May I try?" Sergeant Miller asked, stepping forward. His average came out to 0.07 seconds. Lieutenant Park managed 0.09 seconds. The other two humans in the delegation, whose names I learned were Corporal Thompson and Dr. Hayes, both scored under 0.1 seconds. Thex set the device down very carefully, as if afraid it might explode like the grip meter had. "This does not make sense," he muttered. "Neural transmission speeds should be limited by biology. Unless your nerve fibers are somehow more efficient than standard biological models." Dr. Hayes, a scholarly-looking man with grey at his temples, nodded enthusiastically. "Actually, that is partially correct. Human neural architecture evolved under selective pressures that favored rapid threat response. When you live on a planet where gravity makes everything fall faster and hit harder, where predators can accelerate quickly, where a stumble can result in broken bones, you develop very good reflexes, or you die out. Your entire species," I said slowly, working through the implications, "is biologically optimized for surviving in what the rest of us would consider an actively hostile environment." "Well," Reeves said, "when you put it that way it sounds dramatic. We just call it home." The remainder of the conference proceeded in a somewhat dazed fashion. Council members kept finding excuses to test various human capabilities, and each test resulted in the humans performing at levels that ranged from impressive to absolutely absurd. Endurance trials? The humans got bored before showing signs of fatigue. Temperature tolerance? Their acceptable range was twice the galactic average. Oxygen efficiency? They could function in atmospheric conditions that would leave most species gasping. By the time we broke for refreshments, the entire council was in a state of collective shock. I found myself standing next to Captain Reeves at the beverage station. She was examining the available drinks with interest, occasionally scanning them with a small device that I assumed was checking for compatibility with human biochemistry. "You are enjoying this," I accused her. She looked at me, and her expression shifted into something between amusement and sympathy. "A little bit, yes. But also I am genuinely confused about why everyone seems so surprised." "Did your intelligence reports not include any of this information?" "They included raw data," I admitted. "Numbers and measurements. But numbers on a page are very different from watching someone crack a floor with a writing implement." Reeves laughed, a warm sound that made several nearby council members flinch reflexively. "Fair point. For what it is worth, we are not trying to intimidate anyone. We genuinely want to join the galactic community. Earth has a lot to offer in terms of trade, culture, scientific knowledge, and apparently physical capabilities that border on superhuman by our standards." "Superhuman by your standards," she corrected gently. "Just human by ours. That is kind of the point, I think. What is normal depends entirely on your frame of reference." I selected a drink, some kind of fruit extract, that was supposed to be calming. I needed calming. "You realize this changes everything, right? The council is going to have to completely reconsider its understanding of baseline physical capabilities, our safety standards, our equipment tolerances, our assumptions about what constitutes reasonable environmental conditions. All of it will need revision." Reeves sipped her own drink, made a face suggesting it was not to her taste, and set it aside. "That sounds like a lot of work." "It is going to be a bureaucratic nightmare," I confirmed. "But necessary?" I thought about the cracked floor, the broken grip meter, the look on Thix's face when Reeves had casually demolished every physical record he thought was unbreakable. "Yes," I said finally. "Necessary. Because if you humans are going to be part of the galactic community, we need to understand what you are capable of, both for safety reasons, and because, well, I suspect you are going to be very useful to have around." "Useful how?" I gestured at the conference hall, where several council members were still arguing about the test results. "You come from a world that tried very hard to kill you at every opportunity, and instead of dying out, you got stronger. You built tools, you developed technology, you learned to thrive in conditions that would break most other species. That kind of resilience, that kind of adaptability, is exactly what the galaxy needs." Reeves smiled, and it was the first entirely genuine expression I had seen from her since the delegation arrived. "Thank you, Vornik. That means more than you probably realize." The conference reconvened an hour later, and the tone had shifted significantly. The condescension was gone, replaced by something resembling cautious respect. Quick stood at the head of the table, his posture straighter than before. After consultation with my fellow council members, he announced, "We have decided to accelerate Earth's membership application process. Pending final approval from the full council assembly, we believe humanity will make a valuable addition to our alliance." Reeves inclined her head graciously. "Earth is honored. We look forward to contributing to the galactic community. There is, however, one condition," Kix continued. "We require human advisors to help us update our safety protocols and environmental standards. Your species represents a significant deviation from our baseline assumptions, and we need expert guidance to ensure proper accommodation. We would be happy to provide whatever assistance you need," Reeves agreed. Thux, who had been silent for most of the session, finally spoke up. "I have a question. Of course, if you are average by human standards, and if your physical capabilities are this far beyond our own, what are your exceptional individuals like? Your soldiers, your athletes, your laborers?" The 5 humans exchanged glances, and I saw something pass between them. Some shared understanding, some private joke. Finally, Reeves answered, "Councillor Thex, I think that is a conversation for another day. Let us take this one step at a time. No need to give everyone nightmares right away." She said it lightly, jokingly. Nobody laughed, because we were all imagining what a human optimized for strength or speed or endurance might be capable of, and the mental images were frankly terrifying. As the delegation left the conference hall, I walked alongside them, ostensibly to guide them back to their shuttle, but really because I was curious. "Captain," I said quietly, "can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead." "When you dropped that pen and cracked the floor, you knew what was going to happen, did you not?" She glanced at me and I saw the mischief in her eyes. "I had a pretty good idea. Yes. So why did you do it?" Reeves stopped walking and turned to face me fully. "Because sometimes, Vornik, people need to see the truth rather than just read about it in reports. We could have spent weeks explaining Earth's gravity, showing them charts and data, trying to make them understand what it means to come from a high-G world. Or we could drop a pen and let physics do the explaining for us. That was quite a risk." "Not really. The worst-case scenario was we crack a floor tile and offer to pay for repairs. The best-case scenario was we get everyone's attention and make them take us seriously as potential allies." "I considered this." "And which scenario did you get?" She smiled. "Both, I think. We definitely got everyone's attention, and I am fairly certain they are taking us seriously now." As I watched the human shuttle depart an hour later, I reflected on the day's events. Humanity had arrived as an unknown quantity, a curiosity from a distant world. They were leaving as something else entirely. They were leaving as a reminder that the universe is stranger and more diverse than we imagine, that our assumptions about what is normal are just that, assumptions, and that sometimes the most important lessons come not from careful study, but from watching a pen fall and shatter the ground beneath it. I filed my report that evening, documenting everything that had occurred. I included detailed observations, measurement data, and my professional recommendation that human environmental specifications be taken very, very seriously. At the bottom of the report I added a personal note. The humans are not what we expected. They are stronger, faster, and more resilient than our models predicted. They come from a world that should have crushed them, and instead it forged them into something remarkable. I believe they will be valuable allies. I also believe we should be very, very glad they are friendly. 3 months later, Earth's membership was officially approved. 6 months after that, human-designed safety equipment became the new galactic standard because it was the only equipment that could survive human use. A year later, there was a human on every council station, and the phrase "built Earth tough" had become the gold standard for durability across the galaxy. And somewhere on Station Gamma 9, preserved under protective glass in the central plaza, there is a cracked floor tile with a small plaque beneath it. The plaque reads, "Where humanity first made an impression." Visitors come from across the galaxy to see it, to run their appendages over the fractured surface, to contemplate the strange species from the high-G world who joined the stars not in spite of their crushing homeworld, but because of it. And every time I pass that memorial, I smile, because it all started with a pen, a simple writing instrument, dropped from shoulder height by a woman who was just trying to prove a point. Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences. Sometimes physics is the best teacher. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe sends you exactly what you need in the form you least expect. The humans came to us from Earth, from their impossible world of crushing gravity and rapid falls, and they changed everything. They laughed at our weakness. We laughed at their strength, and then they dropped a pen, and nobody was laughing anymore.